Welcome back to Growth Without Referrals, the podcast where we talk with business leaders about what's actually working to grow beyond the word of mouth. Today, I'm joined by Ted Beringer, CEO of the Beringer Group. Ted has spent decades advising private-held business owners, family enterprises, and high net worth families through some of the most important decisions they'll ever make, whether that's growing, transitioning, recapitalizing, or selling a business. Ted, really glad to have you here.
Thanks, Mark. It's my pleasure. It's great to be on. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. So, Ted, for people meeting you for the first time, can you give us the short version of your background and what kind of work you and your team do today?
Sure. So, Mark, I was born in Buffalo, New York, and my claim to fame is I was a caddy that got into a country club that I caddied at in Buffalo. So I was the first caddy to be let in, so I loved it. So luckily for me, I had a nice career. I started working with Johnson & Johnson, then I worked with Connecticut General, and I worked with Capital Analysts of Colorado. And in 1980, I moved to Philadelphia area and formed a business, which is now known as the Beringer Group. That company, when we started it, we did planning for business owners and added a component. Beginning, we were estate planners. And then we said, hey, you know what? Some of these people are starting to sell. In 81 and 82, Bert Kravitz, other people came around. People were starting to sell their companies. So we added an investment banking component in-house. And so our claim to fame was there's very few other people that help you keep your company and transfer it or help you sell it to a third party. And because of that, we're agnostic to solution. We're not driving you somewhere and saying, you should do this or you should do that based on what's better for me. We only care what's better for the business owner. I've met some of the greatest families in America. We still work for many of them, the people that we've had. In the year 2000, I sold my business to a bank, and that particular acquisition went well, except that the same year they bought me, they bought an investment banking company, and they decided to switch my planning division to the private bank and the investment banking to their M&A group. And the end result of that was we had to sell for a solution. I said, I can't do that, so I left. A couple of people asked to rejoin. I wasn't going to do that. Under the non-compete version of that, we had a business. We started a new business where we help people decide, should you build your own family office? Should you outsource it? Or should you have a hybrid? And back then, in 2000, family offices weren't as prevalent as they are today. And so we really did that early on in the process of the family office. We have our own family office, and we continue to work for family offices. Our original clients, 30 of our original clients, we were allowed to keep under the non-compete. And we've added some great companies since then. And my son, frankly, the best part of the whole thing is my son couldn't work with the bank because of nepotism. So I have all my sons working in the company, and my son, Chris, is now the president. The CEO, actually, I'm now, I guess, the chairman. And Chris owns the company because you can't be an estate planner and not do your own estate planning. So that's us. In a nutshell, the current client base is just some of the most wonderful people you'll ever meet, Mark. What a blessing for me to be able to help them.
Ted, great story, and I appreciate you sharing. One thing I find really interesting about your world is that a lot of business owners wait way too long to think about transitioning or long-term planning. When do owners typically realize, I should have started this earlier?
Well, they often realize it after we finish the work because they realize just how much is involved and how much easier it might have been if they had lower values. But, when you're building a business, I don't think people understand how tough it is to be a business owner. You are pulled in 50 sides all the time, customers, banks, other things that you're dealing with up and down, plus you're managing a family. And, your family takes time and effort. So you've got all these things going on. And on your list to do is often, got to get my estate plan in place. And sometimes they do it and they check the box. But what often happens is after they check that box, it's kind of put aside. And the problem is your family situation changes, the estate tax laws changes, a lot of things change. And so we find that if you're the business owner, you've waited a little too long to have what we call a fire drill. Maybe I ought to just check how's everything working. And I will tell you this, if we run a fire drill for a business, at least 8 out of 10 times, there's a hole in that plan. Example, I named a trust company as the trustee to run my business if something happens to me when my kids were 18, 16, and 14. Now my two sons are running the company, and the trustee is likely to sell the business the day I pass. Not necessarily a good plan. So there's just these little checks. The other thing that people check the box with is they buy second-to-die life insurance to pay estate taxes with. And the reality is the problem isn't when you both die. Your wife tends to live 15 years after you do. By the time she dies, you don't have the money to pay the taxes, and the insurance wasn't helpful. And usually when I ask a business owner how many of you in this meeting have had second to die, they raise their hands. And I say, well, that's not a good plan because you want to use the insurance if you pass and buy the assets into a trust, keep it out of your estate forever, and hope your wife lives till she's 110. And it has no impact on the ability of the business to continue. So it's little things like that, Mark. Not bad. It's just the business owner's done it. And then it's in that box. I did my job. I did what I had to do. Problem is things change too fast. And for all of us, I mean, how fast has the last 10 years gone for you? I know it's gone pretty fast for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that one of the things you specialize is helping owners think through the keep, sell decision. And that's such a big decision and probably emotional one too. How do you help someone think clearly about when they often spent decades building the business?
Well, that's a great question. And it is fraught with emotion because if you have 4 kids like I do, you have a 5th kid. It's your business. And the benefit that we have is we're a family business. Everything that you have to think about, we have to deal with ourselves. The only difference is I know all the rules. You don't. And so when you talk to somebody about it, you're going to keep or sell. Sometimes they've made their mind up. I'm definitely going to keep. I've got a kid in the business. Sometimes they go, well, I'm going to work 10 more years. Sometimes they're just not sure. And sometimes along the way, whatever they thought they were going to do 10 years ago changes along the way. So there's all these variations of where you sit on that path. And our job is to kind of understand what his goals and objectives are. The other thing is to understand the market, because there are times like the last year or so when people like private equity groups are paying ridiculous amounts for businesses. So you have to think to yourself, well, I know I could get a lot of money for my company. So you have to realize if I don't take that opportunity, then I basically bought my business for a number that I think is a little high there. But I bought it. I own it. So you got to at least think about that. And then the question, well, what about timing? Because I'm not going to work for somebody else. I don't want to do that. I've got 10 years left. What am I going to do? And there are interesting options out there, like you could sell a minority role. We have a very nice situation now where one family is selling a role where a minority buyer is buying it, and they don't ever have to sell the balance. They just got a liquidity exit. Now, years ago, you'd have never even had that option. These options today are really different and unique. And the only point that I would make to any business owner is just be aware of your options. How do you get money off the table? And if you're not going to sell it, you need to have what we call as a separate asset base. If you're never going to monetize this business, then you better have some money over on the side for you at some point in time when you're not working as hard and you need money out of the company can't afford it. Well, you've already built that separate asset base. These are little tips that they don't think about that. I'm putting all my money back in the business. I'm living a great lifestyle. What could go wrong with that? Well, sometimes things happen with the economy and there's some glitches in there. And we just have to give you all the opportunity to do whatever you want to do without having to do anything like forced sale of a company because you're not ready to sell it.
Okay. And I imagine a lot of these decisions are just not financial. It's identity, family, legacy, employees, timing, all wrapped together. When you're working with a family-owned or closely held business, how much of your job is strategy and how much of it is helping people navigate the human side of the decision?
I think I can separate the two. I mean, that's a great question, Mark. That's a great question, but it's both. It's both. And it forces you to kind of look and say, I've got three kids and 2 of them should never run this company. and one should. I've got to be honest with myself. I've got to think through that hard decision. How do I tell one son, you're not going to be the owner of the voting stock? I have one client that I've had for several years. Dad and I talked the same thing through. He put the whole business in trust and was going to give them all equal rights. And I said, you got to give the son running the business the vote. And the father said, you know what? I agree with you. And now we're 35 years later and it's worked great for everybody. Family's fine. They all get along. The company's doing great. So little things like that, Mark, that get thought about and lost because you're trying to do the right thing. Is the right thing to give them all control, or is the right thing to give the one who's running the business control? Only the business owner can decide that, but they need somebody like me to put up the mirror that says, this is what you're doing, and here's what that could lead to. And without that, you might make a bad decision. And then somebody like me comes along 10 years later talking to your wife because you passed, and she can't undo it.
Good point. So your business, Ted, is built on trust, discretion, and high-stakes decisions. So I'm curious, when you look back over the years, how has your business actually grown?
We've basically been a cold lead marketing company. One point, I call it the act of God close. One of my people was making a call to a extremely successful, extremely well-known family business in California. And they had an electrical outage. Surprise, surprise, in California. Can you imagine that? And somehow the phone went back on, and the owner of the business was on the phone with my guy. And so we got the appointment, which I don't think there's a chance in the world we'd ever gotten to him. And that person's become a great client of ours over the years. And so we get our business by trying to get in front of business owners. That we belong to a few buying groups where we go out and meet with people that are part of an industry. We do mailings. We still pick up the phone. The phone still is an opportunity to get there. And of course, since we've had so many clients over the years, we've got some great referrals that have also helped. So in the world we live in, if we get a chance to look at your data, which means at least an hour or two with you and a chance to look at a few things like your balance sheet and your buy-sell agreement and your will maybe and a few other things, if we get a chance to look, at least 60% of the time, we find something that's big enough that they engage us. So our whole goal in marketing is let us take a look on our nickel. And that to us has worked very well. It's a tougher world now, as you can imagine. Cold calling is really hard. It's hard to get through to anybody that's successful. Mailing, how many emails do you get a day soliciting something? I get a lot. So we try to use everything we can. I've got a great group of young folks that are out there trying to market. Nothing's easy. And it never was easy, but it's harder now. It's harder to get that lead, harder to get in the door. But if we can get in the door, as you point out, with the years of experience we've had, odds are I've seen a situation like that family has, and I can give them 2 or 3 things that we did to help that family that we could do. So we need to get a chance to get a look. If we get a look, we probably get hired a lot.
Okay. And Ted, what do most people misunderstand about growing an advisory business like yours?
I guess it's all about the people. Not sure people realize it takes a unique person to work in a business where you don't know what next year is going to look like. We have some steady revenue, but for the most part, we're an annual business where the revenue matters every year. And some people would like more certainty as to revenue. I don't think everybody understands in the advisory world. If you're not getting a client tomorrow, you've got a problem 2 days later. So you've got to constantly be looking for opportunity while you're solving problems. I'm not sure everybody understands that. And I would also tell you, not everybody's a marketer, and not everybody understands how hard it is to be a marketer. And sometimes the people that design and solve the problem couldn't get somebody in the door. Not everybody understands that. I think sometimes the marketer's not appreciated for the ability to open up that opportunity. I used to say when I was younger, sir, at one point in time, you needed somebody like you to help, like me to help you. And so I'm asking you for a shot. And that worked pretty well when I was in the 20s. Doesn't work now anymore at that level, but that was a good way to get somebody to really, you were me one day. You needed somebody to give you a break along the way. And so if you give me a break, If I don't earn your trust, I'm out of there in an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours. If I earn your trust, we might have a long-term relationship. So it's not easy being in the advisory business, and I think everybody would love to get referrals, but people are a little reluctant to just hand names out and tell you to go call my best friend or do this or do that. And so we've got to do other ways to market. And we're all annoyed by all that marketing, but every once in a while I answer something. I go, boy, I'm glad I answered that one. Sometimes you hope the client just takes a shot, takes a chance, and lets you in the door. And I've got some great young folks that can have that story of, I'm a young guy trying to make my way in the business world, and I can help you. Give me a shot.
Okay. And Ted, if someone's trying to grow a trust-based professional services business today, what would you tell them not to do?
I would tell them to not push a product hard. Hard sales in an advisory business is not a good way to go. You might win some cases that way. You might get some clients, but if you want a long-term relationship, which we do, I would advise them to lay out the options and let the client make that decision without a hard close and a hard push, because the client that we deal with, they're strong decision makers. The more you push, the more they'll back away. But if you've got a good idea and you can lay it out logically and you give them a couple of alternatives, then you don't have to push that hard to close it. And if you do, the harder you push, the less likely it is you're going to get the sale. That's what I'd tell them.
I like it. And Ted, back to trust. So I imagine a lot of your best work happens long before a transaction ever occurs, meaning by the time someone actually does something, sell, recapitalize, restructure, transition, a lot of trust has already been built. What does that trust building process usually look like in your world?
Well, we wouldn't have been successful if we weren't pretty honest and upfront. We just have to be. You have to be honest to the client. This is who I am. This is what I do. These are the kind of folks I work with. And my job is to solve problems. And so I would like a shot to solve your problem. And so it takes time to build that trust. But I'll just tell you this. I get calls from CEOs all the time. Hey, Ted, I've got this issue. I've got that issue. What do you think? And that came from years of being there when that phone rang. The other thing that helps, I think, build trust is we don't charge hourly. I think that helps. I think the hourly model is, it's normally fair, that most people are fair with it. But I never want the client thinking, do I want to pick up the phone and call? I got a problem. But I don't know that I want to pay the $2,000 an hour it's going to cost. And so I like it to be easy for the client to call. I like to be on a retainer of some kind that I'm available and basically 24/7. You got a problem, call us. We'll try to help you. And over time, you earn that by being there when they've got that problem. You get a call on a Saturday or Sunday, you get right back to somebody, and then you fix the problem. I look back, say 5 years, 10 years later, you look back and you tell people, let's take the movie A Wonderful Life. And what if the Beringer Group had never been there? So here's the trajectory that your business might have gone on, but because of us, it went this way. And how different might things be if you hadn't done that particular transaction, like buy that company or sell part of your company or hire this executive, or what would your world look like if you hadn't done that? And that creates for us 40, 50, 100 stories of, this is where it might have been if we hadn't been there. And so that's what we work for. The money's nice. We do fine. We're paid fairly. But imagine the feeling of helping a business owner that built this amazing business, half the time from nothing, and we transitioned it in the right way to make him and his family feel great about the final result there, whether it went to the next generation or whether it was sold to a third party. Boy, is that a good feeling.
Okay. And have you found that clients often come in with one assumption, and then, after working it through with you, realize the better answer was actually something completely different?
I don't know I can't put a percent on it, but it's a lot. I'm a business owner. You're a business owner. We're pretty straightforward at knowing what the solution is. We're pretty good at solving problems. So when we've got that answer down there, we got it. And, it's not that easy to take business owners and move them off that dime. Right? They're there. They got the answer. I will say this. The clients we've worked over the years, they end up wanting the right answer, not the one they liked initially. So eventually you get them there. But working with business owners is not easy. because they're the smartest people you've ever met. They've built this great business. What they don't know is all the rules of estate taxes and family dynamics and family conflicts and all the things that can go mess that little beautiful thing that they've built up. I would say 25% of our business is to eliminate or minimize family conflict, because the last thing you need is to build this great business and you got two of your kids fighting over it. Not a good thing, right? You didn't build it for that reason. It's an amazing responsibility when you're our firm to make sure we get this right. And the business, you got to make them sit down and at least hear the story. They'll often, almost always make the right decision, but you've got to make sure you lay it out in a way that they understand the options. And if you made that, the best statement that we use out there is, no plan is a plan. And that does get their attention. So if you haven't planned for succession, well, that's a plan. It's wide open. There's no plan. Okay. So our job is to make no plan a plan. And that plan's changeable until you get hit by the bus. But before you get hit by the bus, have a plan that works at the time.
Okay. So in other words, sometimes the win isn't selling the business. Sometimes the win is having clarity. And if a business owner is listening to this right now, maybe they've built something meaningful. Maybe they put off thinking about the future. What would you want them to start thinking about sooner than they probably are?
I would like them to look forward. We all realize, Mark, how fast time goes. It just goes fast. And it goes faster as you get older. How long did it take you for 4 years of college versus the last 4 years? It's like 4 years of college seems like an awful long time to me. 4 years now, I can't remember. It's gone. So I've got to get them to think 10 years from now, your 20-year-old is going to be 30. You may or may not be here. If you're here, you're going to be 70. Are you still working full time? Are you not? Are you enjoying the challenges? What's your business worth in 10 years? What are you going to do about that? And if you're going to keep it or you're not sure, do you have a base over here that allows that? Because that's where all your wealth is. Some of these states think it's a good idea to tax your wealth. So imagine taxing a guy that has $1 billion company 10%. Well, the company isn't worth $1 billion in dollars. He doesn't have $1 billion. He's spending all that money that he's making on employees and products and giving things to the world and helping the community with lots of stuff. So it's the same thing here. You've got to think about what the next 10 years brings. Where are you going to be? And you've got to decide, I have an obligation to my employees, my family, and my clients that I have a succession plan in place one way or another. The things that they need from this company are either available or I let them know in advance they're not going to be available. Okay. And then they can make their own decision. So, there's so many options today. It's crazy. Private equity is willing to buy a minority piece. Private equity is willing to hold on. There are family offices buying businesses that don't want to sell it to private equity. They'll keep your legacy going. On the other hand, there are also businesses that we work with that started just after the Civil War, with 120 family members that are still there. And that business is growing like crazy and doing a great job. Doing a great job for the family and the customers and the employee group. So what's this going to look like 10, 20? What am I building? Why am I doing it? Why am I coming in at 7:30 and I'm leaving at 6:30 at night and there's nobody else in the building but me? We used to make cold calls. I tell everybody, look, you got to make cold calls at 7:30 to 8:30 and 5:30 to 6:30, because that's when you're going to get the business owner without a secretary answering his or her phone. The funny thing is, some of our best leads have happened because the client picked up his phone at an early or late hour when no one else was in the building.
Very interesting. And Ted, if people want to learn more about you or the Beringer Group, where should they go?
Well, we have a website. You can go to the Beringer Group website. You can just Google us, and there's a lot of information about us. We're easy to find, easy to get to. My son, Chris, myself, happy to answer any calls from anybody at any time. Happy to give them some, that you don't have to hire us to get us to give you some ideas. And we're happy to talk to anybody. We love talking to business owners all the time. So we're easily reachable. The internet's made things pretty easy with the way the websites work and how easily accessible they are. And you can't hide who you are anymore, by the way, because somebody's going to Google you or now chat GPT you.
So true. And Ted, what I'll do, and for our listeners, I'll put your contact information, your company website in the description below this podcast. And Ted, this has been a very thoughtful conversation. Thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective. And if for anyone listening, if you got value from this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who would benefit from it. We'll see you next time on Growth Without Referrals.
Thank you, Mark. Great to meet you.
Thank you.